Turmeric health benefits. What is turmeric good for? My name is Dave. I'm a pharmacist. This is turmeric. It's a natural product. It has a vibrant color, and that vibrant color comes from a component of turmeric known as curcumin, which accounts for about 3 to 4% of the mass of turmeric. Curcumin is also one of the most biologically active components of turmeric, and it finds itself in the spotlight on most of the research into the potential health benefits of turmeric. Now, as I think through the logical applications for curcumin, what could the greatest impact be? I think about prevention of colon cancer. And the reason I think about that is because, well, we see all these potential anti-cancer properties, and we know that curcumin is not well absorbed. Therefore, most of a dose that you would take by mouth would remain in the gastrointestinal tract, for instance, the colon, and you would expect to see an outsized proportion of the activity of curcumin exerted in that area. So I dug this paper up trying to investigate what other scientists thought about the possibility that curcumin could prevent colon cancer, and they found that in cell models as well as animal models, there is some promise. So that sounds good, but the problem with that is cell models and animal models are at the bottom of the hierarchy of medical evidence. So that is low quality evidence. What we want to see is randomized controlled trials. Better yet would be a systematic review or a meta-analysis of a group of randomized controlled trials. So we're not going to find that when it comes to prevention of colon cancer. But if we look at cancer broadly, and in particular the treatment of cancer, we can find a systematic review of 7 randomized controlled trials. The problem with these trials is that they are all small, they are all low quality, they are looking at different types of cancer. So you would think by looking at this hierarchy, oh, we found a systematic review of randomized controlled trials, we're good to go. This is going to be conclusive information. But in reality, when you put garbage in, you get garbage out. Nonetheless, what they found is that curcumin is not an effective compound in either blocking or slowing down the progression of cancer. Given that the trials they were taking into account were garbage, does this conclusion hold any water? I would say no. Further research is needed. And like I said, this is therapy, cancer therapy. These are people with cancer. Cancer prevention is still an open question. That data is all preclinical, based on test tubes, cell lines, animal studies. We need better research looking into the effects of curcumin in humans if we want to understand how it may prevent colon cancer and other types of cancer potentially. So when it comes to cancer, in my opinion, the most interesting area for this research, we just don't know yet. But what do we know? Based on randomized controlled trials, what is turmeric good for? The most glaring trend in all of this research into curcumin is glucose and fat metabolism. In this review, the researchers looked at 110 clinical trials examining the potential metabolic benefits of curcumin, and they did see several beneficial trends. But these trends really only showed up in people who had insulin resistance and obesity, metabolic syndrome, or type 2 diabetes. What they saw were decreases in blood glucose levels, decreases in HbA1c, insulin resistance, blood lipid levels, i.e. cholesterol, decreases in biomarkers of inflammation and oxidative stress, and also decreases in body weight. The next disease category with obvious trends was arthritis. This paper is a systematic review and meta-analysis of 29 randomized controlled trials. There were almost 2,400 participants spread across these 29 trials looking at 5 different types of arthritis. Now, I'm only going to highlight the results from the 2 most common types of arthritis, which are osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. So when it came to osteoarthritis, they saw decreases in pain, joint stiffness, and also increases in joint function, which is exactly what you'd want to see, basically symptom improvement. And then when it came to rheumatoid arthritis, we saw improved lab values like decreases in C-reactive protein, or CRP, which is a biomarker of inflammation. Also decreases in ESR, which is the erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and rheumatoid factor, or RF. All of that points to decreased inflammation in these patients. And the next disease category with obvious trends was ulcerative colitis. And I'm just going to pull a quotation from this scoping review to summarize the findings. Ulcerative colitis trials over the last decade, of which there were 6, have consistently reported reductions in clinical symptoms as well as endoscopic improvement and or decreases in calprotectin or other disease activity biomarkers. In other words, very similar to the findings in patients with arthritis, in that you have an improvement in symptoms and you also have an improvement in the biomarkers of the disease. Next disease state, which didn't have the strongest trends, but has a very interesting conclusion and also a connection to everything else: depression. And this is important because 50 to 60% of patients with depression fail to respond adequately to SSRIs. SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and they are pretty much the gold standard for the treatment of depression. To summarize the findings, I'm going to pull a quotation from this paper here. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis of 10 randomized controlled trials, and they say that curcumin is a safe and simple intervention that could potentially be beneficial for patients with depression, but the evidence quality is low. So if the evidence quality is low, why did I include this? It's very simple. We're going to look at this paper now. Inflammatory markers in depression. Looking at 107 case control studies, inflammatory biomarkers were significantly higher in patients with depression. The conclusion that the researchers made in this paper was depression is confirmed as a pro-inflammatory state. In other words, inflammation is involved. And what do we know about curcumin? What do we know about turmeric at this point after looking at all of this information? It decreases inflammation. Now I'm just going to summarize the top 3 health benefits of turmeric. Number 1, like I just said, inflammation. And that's really important. It's not just involved in depression, and it's not just involved in diseases that end in itis, like arthritis and ulcerative colitis. More than 50% of all deaths are attributed to chronic inflammatory diseases. So if there's something simple and safe that we can do, like adding a spice like turmeric to our diet, then I'm all for it. The number 2 biggest health benefit of turmeric or curcumin was improved glucose metabolism. And this is important because 50% of U.S. adults have diabetes or prediabetes, which means they're on their way to developing full-blown diabetes. Specifically, almost 12% have diabetes, and about 38% of the U.S. population has prediabetes. So once again, if we can do something simple like add a spice such as turmeric to the diet to improve the glucose levels and other aspects of metabolic health, then I'm all for it. And last but not least, the number 3 biggest benefit of turmeric or curcumin is cardiovascular health. So I didn't highlight this very much in the presentation, but there were reductions in cholesterol levels, and there were also improvements in arterial compliance and improvements in endothelial function. And all of those things taken together, that could mean reductions in the risk of heart attack and stroke. And given that heart disease is the number 1 cause of death in the United States, that's a very important thing. And if it's something that can be mitigated at least a little bit by something as simple as adding a spice to the diet, then that would be wonderful. And I do want to point out that turmeric or curcumin is not settled science. There are just challenges in this research that are probably going to continue for quite some time. For instance, The trials that we have available are small and low quality. These are plant-derived products, and that's a problem because the plant that you get from one farm or one location may not be the same as the plant that you get from another farm or another location. There can be variance in the chemical composition of a plant from one place to another. Also, there's variation in the product bioavailability. A lot of these studies looked at supplements, and these supplements have absorption enhanced or bioavailability enhanced mechanisms that make it hard to compare one to another. So these are some of the challenges, and hopefully we get better studies in the future to overcome these challenges and get solid answers. But for now, hopefully this presentation was helpful to you. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.